My name is Dana Ellyn. As Rachel said, I'm a full-time painter living here in DC. I've been full-time since about 2002. What I plan to do, I brought a little outline, not that I don't know myself and my story, but I would tend to jump all over the place. So excuse me for kind of looking down. And it isn't like someone else wrote up my life story here. I will talk about myself freely. So kind of starting from the beginning, I'll give a rundown of childhood up to now, which is a lot of years, but I'll try to do it relatively quickly. So I started off life in Brooklyn, New York. Did somehow escape having an accent. Both my parents are like thick New York accents. But we moved to Connecticut when I was a kid, so I basically grew up in this little town in Connecticut. The benefit to that from an artistic point of view for me was I had the same art teacher from the time I was in 3rd grade up until 10th grade. So I had an art teacher who kind of embraced me, led me through, and when you're in such a small school, you become, pigeonholed sounds like a bad word, but I was, the artist kid, and there was the athletic kid, and there was the pretty girl, and there was, everyone kind of had their little niche. So I was, the artist, so I got to do the campaign posters for, the school elections, and I would do the big poster that the basketball team would break through in front of every game, and do the sets for high school plays. So I was always multi-talented in the sense of I was forced into different roles. So I did a lot of arts and crafts as well as just fine art drawing. I spent a lot of time just in my room by myself, which now I know is the makings of an artist. You have to be able to be by yourself all the time. I love being by myself even since I was little. Looking back, I realized I was kind of trying to escape the rest of the family, perhaps. So that might, which led to the other chicken and the egg, which came first? Was I in my room to escape people, or was I just in my room a lot, which it worked, whatever the case. So all the time I spent in my room, my parents were very supportive of my art. They did see, and from parent-teacher conferences, were told I had talent, just lovely. I don't know how much you can tell from a young child, but it was told to me early, which was very encouraging, of course. So they'd buy me books, they'd buy me supplies. So all this time I spent in my room, I would take all these how-to books and just go beginning to end, lesson by lesson by lesson, which the early days of me being the type A person that I am now. So I still have those books, I still look at them and remember each and every exercise, and I just went, like I said, chapter to chapter. So in that sense, you could sort of consider me self-taught as a child, but then I was, like I said, very much embraced by the school teachers and school programs, so it definitely benefited my early development in that way. On the childhood front, talk about what I sort of go back and forth between some stories and some paintings. This painting here is called Dancing Queen. It is a self-portrait. I do a lot of self-portraits. This is not exactly an accurate rendition of myself at age 5, but it's from a photo of me in my ballet class. In these childhood years, I was affectionately named Butterball. It's a very nice thing to do to a child. Yes, I remember being called Butterball, and my sister's nickname was Wishbone. Think of what that does to you. So my sister Marnie was the pretty one and the skinny one, and she was the popular one. I wasn't unpopular, but she was, in the popular crowd with all the cool kids. And I always felt a little uneasy. I always felt a little bit not as attractive and maybe a little bit chubbier. And I was looking back at photos probably about 3 years ago, kind of pulled out all the childhood photos. And I'm looking at them, and there's no way to say this without sounding kind of unhumble. But I was looking at them, I was like, I was cute. Like all of this lack of confidence I look back on now, and I see the pictures, I'm like, okay, I wasn't that chubby. And so I now embraced this photo. I was like, darn it, I was a cute kid. Why were they calling me Butterball? So this painting is sort of a, look at me, I'm a cute kid, and I'm going to do this huge. So this one felt good. This was a very self-indulgent painting, I guess, as a lot of self-portraits are. So that one is called Dancing Queen. Moving on a little past childhood and insecurities, between 10th and 11th grade, I went to a program called the Center for Creative Youth. My grade school art teacher recommended me for it. It's a program that takes place at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And you have to be recommended into the program by your art teacher. And I was given a scholarship to go, and it was a summer-long program at a university at age 16. So this is where I really embraced that, heck, maybe this is something I could pursue. Maybe this is a real talent, not just I can do it a little bit better than the other kids. So this program was incredible, to be immersed in it, to be amongst all these other kids, all these really artistic kids that were really quirky, and I realized, gosh, I'm actually not quirky. Like, I always thought I was the quirky one. But I was amongst all these kids that are actors and dancers, and I really learned to come out of my shell because I was very, very shy up until that point. So this kind of threw me into a batch of strangers, forced me to come out of my shell a bit, and really helped me grow as an artist because they gave you some real lessons. The first day of the program, they said, what is it that you have the most difficulty with? And I said, hands and feet. So guess what I spent the entire summer doing? Learning how to draw hands and feet. So now they're in every painting. It definitely helps because I really enjoy doing hands. I find them to be a very expressive part of painting. So after that program, my parents moved us from my little town in Connecticut to Florida, where I wound up in a school that was, my graduating class was now bigger than my entire school system was in Connecticut. So in Connecticut, I had 50 people in my class, and I graduated high school with 800. So that, too, brought me out of my shell just a wee bit more because it had to. On from there, I wound up going to college here in D.C., which brings us up to the present. Not that college is that recent for me. But I went to GW, George Washington University, and there I was a fine arts and art history major. I kind of wanted to do both because I wanted some academic background. I also just loved learning about art history for the first time. In grade school, high school, I don't remember ever learning art history at all. They just teach you the technical aspects. So the idea of learning what was behind all of this, my greatest influence prior to that was, the Impressionists because they were pretty. So getting to learn about art was, I think, the biggest next step in me, in my development as a painter. To learn the stories behind paintings became more interesting to me than anything else. As a child, and even in my first year of college, I remember going to the National Gallery and seeing these big abstracts in the East Wing and going, what's that? I don't get it. And I was very frustrated, like, how can that be a painting? All the questions that a lot of people ask all the time, like, that's just a drip or that's just a square. But once I learned about the artists and the history and who painted with who, it changed everything for me. It changed my appreciation for art and my goals as a painter. So I looked into getting a job at a museum thinking that would be my course. Like, okay, I'm going to get a good paying job that will afford me to be able to paint on the side. Very realistically thinking, there's no way to just graduate college and, ooh, I'm going to be an artist because how would I support myself? As I started looking into different museums to possibly work in DC, which there are plenty of to choose from, I wound up getting a job at the Holocaust Museum, which had nothing to do with art, but it was very fascinating, and it just sort of was the first job that came up, and I thought, I'll take it, let's see what it's like. And that's sort of where the spiral of career path things took hold. I was in very brief at the Holocaust Museum, wound up making maps there, so wound up learning cartography. I was drawing maps of concentration camps. Very uplifting work. And with my mapping experience there, I wound up getting a job at a map company. And with my job at the map company, I learned to be a graphic artist, and then I got a job at a law firm as a graphic artist. And at the law firm, that was my last corporate job that I had. Was there for 7 years and learned all these skills that I needed to then quit. They afforded me all the things I needed to not need them anymore, which was great. While I was there, my hours were so long I never got a chance to paint, so my creative needs weren't being fulfilled, which helped a lot because it encouraged me to work that much harder to be able to quit the job so I could be creative. But in the law firm, I learned how to do some business things, like learning all the computer skills I needed. I learned HTML so I could build my own website, which I put up a website in 1997. So my website's been up for a really long time, which I'll touch on that at the end a little bit more, kind of the importance of having one as a painter for me. I also learned how to teach. I was a trainer there, teaching people computer skills. So now I'm able to have a segue into how would I support myself. So I wound up teaching art classes. So taking all those skills together, in 2002, I quit the job. Yay! Happiest day of my life. next to, well, other things, well, we'll just say that was the happiest day in a big way, a big life-changing day, certainly. So I quit in 2002, and to support myself, I started teaching painting classes out of my studio. And that was enough money on the side to live a very meager life, which it turned out living on nothing was the happiest I've ever been, versus I was making a really good salary at the law firm, and I was the unhappiest I've ever been. So I've learned money is nothing, happiness and quality of life is everything.